Guys, a little while ago, we posted a big 7-part series on the channel called Dumbledore's Big Plan, all about how Dumbledore is secretly pulling all the strings on Harry's life, forcing him into all the various situations that eventually help him defeat Lord Voldemort. It was a lot of fun to write. The only issue was it took up 7 different videos, so you had to go find the next video, rewatch the intro. There's a bunch of ads and stuff in there. Got a little bit long, so we decided that we were going to just stitch them all together, make it one big convenient video. We took all the ads out, all the outros. It should be nice, clean, start to finish. Hope you enjoy Dumbledore's Big Plan. Hey, brother! Of course, we know that Dumbledore is always working tirelessly against the dark arts and gathering as much information about Voldemort as he can, trying desperately to prevent him from returning to power or else just destroy him completely. And of all wizards, you'd probably think, yes, Dumbledore is the man for the job. He is widely accepted as the greatest wizard of the age. He has already defeated the other most notorious wizard ever, Gellert Grindelwald, and is also the only wizard Voldemort ever feared, or so they say. And yet, after Voldemort attacks Harry and loses his powers and goes into hiding, Dumbledore does nothing to hunt him down and finish him off for good, even though he is certain Voldemort will return. He has 13 years to act on this and maybe finish Voldemort off for good, but does nothing. Why? Well, we actually know why, and it's because of the prophecy about Harry Potter. The prophecy was made by Sybil Trelawney to Albus Dumbledore and is the reason Voldemort went after Harry in the first place. It says, "The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches. The Dark Lord will mark him as his equal, and one must kill the other, for neither can live while the other survives." And while that obviously means a lot for Harry, the curious thing is what it might mean personally to Dumbledore. Because until that point, until he heard the prophecy, he probably considered it his personal responsibility to be the one to finish off Voldemort. But what this prophecy means to Dumbledore is that it won't be him who does it. It means it has to be Harry who does it. Harry is the only one who can do it. Or at least he knows it's Harry after Voldemort goes after him, because before that, I guess it could have also been Neville. But with that in mind, knowing that Dumbledore's ultimate goal is to defeat Voldemort, and knowing Dumbledore knows that only Harry can finish off Voldemort, Dumbledore finds himself in a very unique position. How is he going to handle Harry? Because since he's the only one who knows this information, does that not then also make him responsible for preparing Harry? Like, what a weird position to be in. What should he do? Should he meddle and send Harry down the path he thinks is best suited for defeating Voldemort? Or would meddling send Harry off the path fate has already set for him? Because here's the thing. Harry's victory is not guaranteed. He can still lose. He's just also the only one with any chance at all of winning. So if you're Dumbledore, what do? Well, obviously we know he does meddle, but the question is how much? And the answer is the subject of this entire theory, because the answer is a lot, like more than you can possibly imagine. Every mystery Harry thinks he's solving is being presented to him by Dumbledore. Every significant moment of Harry's life is being carefully constructed behind the scenes by Dumbledore as part of Dumbledore's big plan. Let's do this. Guys, this theory is so vast, we are actually going to break it down book by book. So today, we're just going to be looking at all the things Dumbledore was doing behind the scenes in the Philosopher's Stone. And this one in particular is big because so much of Harry's entire trajectory in the wizarding world is set up in the first book. Philosopher's Stone is full of Dumbledore's meddling, and there is a lot to unpack. But ultimately, I think Dumbledore had 3 main goals for Harry in his first year. First is to control who Harry decides to surround himself with, and perhaps more specifically, to just ensure that Harry doesn't end up in Slytherin. Second is to assess Harry's character as an individual. And third is to test his skills, bravery, and intuition. For Dumbledore, the Philosopher's Stone is largely about determining what kind of boy he's dealing with and how best to guide him in the future. So, first step. Control Harry's friend group and make sure he's not in Slytherin. And this starts right away when Hagrid comes to pick him up and inform him that he's a wizard. Those first 2 days he spends with Hagrid are crucial. They seriously set up a lot of where Harry goes for the rest of his time in the wizarding world. But one of the really big moments they have is when Hagrid tells Harry which house at Hogwarts is the bad one.
There's not a witch or wizard who went bad who wasn't in Slytherin.
People get this point confused a lot because Ron says it in the movie, but it is really Hagrid who says it in the books. Which even as Hagrid is saying, it doesn't make a ton of sense because at that moment, he believes Sirius to have murdered 13 people and Sirius wasn't Gryffindor and he knows Sirius because he borrowed his bike, so you called out Hagrid. Except that you're not because Dumbledore told you to tell Harry this. And let me just say, there's nothing wrong with being in Slytherin. But from Dumbledore's point of view, that is the house Voldemort was in, and I'm sure he doesn't want Harry surrounding himself with all of the Death Eater's kids the moment he gets to Hogwarts. I mean, we do know from the Malfoy family that some of the Death Eaters actually thought Harry might be a new rallying point for them to get behind, so I just really want to keep them away from Harry. Honestly though, I think while Dumbledore wanted him to end up in Gryffindor, I don't think he would have cared if he was in Hufflepuff or Ravenclaw either, just as long as he wasn't in Slytherin. And take note of how Dumbledore does this because he uses this trick a lot. He doesn't guide Harry towards a good choice, he just guides him away from a bad choice. And Hagrid is not the only piece of assurance Dumbledore puts in place to sway Harry away from Slytherin. Let me ask you this. Have you ever thought it was odd that Mrs. Weasley didn't know the platform number the Hogwarts Express was leaving from on Harry's first day? "Now what's the platform number?" said the boy's mother. 9 3/4, piped up a girl, also red-headed, who was holding her hand. Right, so in case you need a refresher, Molly Weasley has 7 children, multiple of which have already spent several years at Hogwarts, if not their entire 7 years at Hogwarts. Not to mention, it is also the school she herself and her husband attended. And if my math is right, and yes, we did pay the math budget for this one, this is her 17th time arriving at the station for the train to leave. And yes, in case you were wondering, it has always been the same platform and the same train. There's actually an entire Pottermore article about just this. Point is, there is just no way she does not know the routine by this point. This theory would suggest that Mrs. Weasley is saying this out loud specifically so that Harry will meet the Weasleys before any other wizarding family. Which, yes, does mean Dumbledore would have arranged this with her ahead of time. And as we explore this theory deeper and deeper, you'll see that Molly and Arthur in particular were integral to his plans in terms of leaking information to Harry or else just watching over him. And if you're wondering how either of them would have gotten involved with Dumbledore when neither of them was in the First Order of the Phoenix, well, bear in mind that Molly had 2 older brothers, Gideon and Fabian, who were both in the First Order of the Phoenix and who both died at the hands of the Death Eaters. But either way, the Weasleys are the perfect family for Dumbledore to surround Harry with. For one, they are all purebloods, but place no value on that particular aspect of themselves at all. And it would mean the first peers Harry would come into contact with would be a prefect, Percy, possibly the 2 most popular kids at school, Fred and George, and a boy in Harry's own year, Ron, all of whom are from a family famously in Gryffindor. Not that any of the boys would be in on this plan at all. It's just a good example of Dumbledore trusting that surrounding Harry with good people will yield good results. It's one of those classic Dumbledore guesses that are usually good. But indeed, Dumbledore gets what he wants because by the time Harry gets to the sorting, all he cares about is just not being in Slytherin.
Not Slytherin. Not Slytherin.
Which brings us to the second big thing Dumbledore is trying to accomplish in the Philosopher's Stone, which is judging Harry's character. And fortunately, he has the exact right tool for the job: the Mirror of Erised. As I'm sure you are aware, the mirror shows whoever stands in front of it whatever is their heart's deepest desire, and when Harry stands in front of it, he sees his family, an image Dumbledore is extremely impressed with. In fact, in Half-Blood Prince, he tells Harry, "Harry, have you any idea how few wizards could have seen what you saw in that mirror?" And make no mistake, Dumbledore absolutely intended Harry to find that mirror specifically so he could see what Harry would see. Consider this. Harry finds the mirror on Christmas, the day he gets the invisibility cloak, which was sent to him by Dumbledore. And we know that Dumbledore was literally waiting in the room, invisible himself, in the middle of the night, like not even looking in the mirror himself, just like, I guess I'll just be invisible here.
Back again, Harry?
How do you know this is again, Dumbledore? How do you know it's again? I think he waits until Christmas to give Harry the cloak because there will be less students at the school wandering around who might then discover the mirror. Because the mirror cannot have just been sitting there in the open, findable all year, because it is very much the kind of thing that if people discovered it and started looking in it, everyone would want to look in it. And if you think, well, is that kind of a leap that he would give him the cloak, assuming he would immediately don it and roam around the castle at night and find the mirror? I don't think so. I mean, Dumbledore knew James, and this was exactly the kind of thing he would do. But here's the other dead giveaway is, why is the mirror up in the school at all when it's supposed to be like down below guarding the stone? In case you have forgotten, Hagrid retrieved the stone for Dumbledore in July, and it's now December. So why is it taking him so long to put the stone in the mirror and the mirror in the basement? Wherever this is, second chamber of secrets, they never explain where they go. What I understand is that somewhere on the third floor of the castle, there's just a hole. Like a deep one. The reason is because, of course, Dumbledore wants Harry to find the mirror so he can see what he sees, but also because of Dumbledore's third goal, which is to test Harry's skill, bravery, and intuition. I'm sure we're not the first to wonder why the obstacles guarding the stone are so easily defeatable by a first year when they're supposed to be keeping out Voldemort. Well, this theory suggests that the obstacles are the obstacles specifically because Dumbledore is testing if Harry Potter can break through them. And this isn't even just us guessing. Harry himself seems to be aware of this. He tells Ron and Hermione, "He's a funny man, Dumbledore. I think he sort of wanted to give me a chance. I think he knows more or less everything that goes on here, you know? I reckon he had a pretty good idea we were going to try, and instead of stopping us, he just taught us enough to help. I don't think it was an accident he let me find out how the mirror worked. It's almost like he thought I had the right to face Voldemort, if I could. But if it's true he set it up specifically to test Harry, you might be thinking, wow, that is really reckless of Dumbledore." And yeah, you would be right about that. But I don't think it's quite as bad as it seems. Because remember, Dumbledore alone has heard the prophecy and knows that either Harry or Voldemort must kill Harry or Voldemort. And I think he's reasonably certain that Voldemort's not going to be able to kill Harry unless he has a body back. And the means by which he's trying to get a body back in this case is by getting the stone, which Dumbledore also knows is 100% safe. It's 100% safe because of the enchantments Dumbledore himself puts on the mirror, which, if you ask me, renders all of the rest of the obstacles kind of pointless. And by kind of pointless, I mean they do not need to be there. Dumbledore could have set up the mirror in Quirrell's office and left him alone with it all year, and he still wouldn't get the stone.
But how do I get it?
Why is he even bothering with the other obstacles? And the answer is to find out if Harry has 1, the skills to break through the obstacles, 2, the intuition to figure out the stone is down there at all, and 3, the courage to face Voldemort. In fact, I dare say the obstacles themselves were chosen specifically because of Harry, Ron, and Hermione's skill set. Yes, I know that the other teachers put the obstacles there, but this theory would suggest that Dumbledore suggested the specific obstacles. But that is why it takes Dumbledore so long to finally put the mirror down there, because he spends the first half of the year observing not just what Harry is good at, but also his friends. But come on, catching the key on the broom, that's all Harry. The giant chess set, that's all Ron. The potions logic puzzle, that is all Hermione. Even taking down the troll, they already did that. And if you're thinking, well, sure, he might have thought Harry was safe, but doesn't that endanger Ron and Hermione? Actually, no, it doesn't, because of the way the potion puzzle works, where only one person was ever going to be able to go through, and I think he must have been reasonably confident it would be Harry. But it's not just that the obstacles are hand-tailored for the Golden Trio's skill sets. It's that Dumbledore is like laying clues all throughout the year for Harry to figure this out. Starting on that first day with Hagrid when he takes him with him to Gringotts to retrieve the stone. That right there, kinda crazy. I mean, the stone is an immensely powerful magical object that Dumbledore thinks Voldemort is about to try to steal, and he just lets Harry see it be taken from the vault. Now, to be fair, he doesn't know that it's super valuable or even what it is, but he's very easily able to put 2 and 2 together once the Daily Prophet reveals that someone tried to break into that vault. Then there's Dumbledore's opening speech, where he says, "And finally, I must tell you that this year the 3rd floor corridor on the right-hand side is out of bounds to everyone who does not wish to die a very painful death. We've discovered a giant hole. We are also considering putting a murder plant at the bottom of the hole in case anyone does fall in, but I have to talk to Professor Sprout about that. It needs to be soft and springy, but also deadly, but also easily defeated. These are children." No, but this particular warning is interesting because Harry then asks Percy. "He's not serious," he muttered to Percy. "Must be," said Percy, frowning at Dumbledore. "It's odd because he usually gives us a reason why we're not allowed to go somewhere." Yes, it is odd. I mean, if you don't want the students to go there, lock the door.
It's locked. That's it. We're done for. Oh, move over.
And don't just lock it, but lock it in a way that is harder to get through than
Hello, Hamora.
And then also, don't even tell them not to go there. Like, who needs to be warned not to go through a door they already can't get through? Even Umbridge is able to magically seal her door against the likes of Alohomora, and that's just so students don't get into her office. This is guarding the Philosopher's Stone we're talking about. And those aren't the only clues by Dumbledore. I'll bring up the invisibility cloak again, which is simply a means for Harry to get out and around the castle. And don't even get me started on all the times Hagrid lets slip a whole bunch of clues.
I shouldn't have said that. Shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have told you that.
Not to mention the complete lack of investigation or action taken after a series of other events that happened throughout the year. Like, how about in Harry's first Quidditch match ever when his broom starts trying to buck him off? Hagrid tells us only powerful dark magic can interfere with a broom, and we later find out from Quirrell that he knew Severus Snape was uttering a counter curse. And we know Snape is loyal to Dumbledore, and in Deathly Hallows, it's later revealed that Dumbledore actually told Snape to keep an eye on Quirrell. So, obviously, Dumbledore knew Quirrell was trying to kill Harry, but, does nothing? How about the troll being let in? Quirrell later supplies a second troll for the protection of the stone. He's also the one to tell the school that the troll has been let in.
Troll! In the dungeon! Troll in the dungeon!
Thought you ought to know.
Like, I'm sorry, but if you're Dumbledore who actually knows all that information while it's happening, it is super obvious who let the troll in. Fire Quirrell. I'm not kidding. I don't know why he doesn't. He so easily could, and yet Quirrell goes unpunished and uninvestigated even for the rest of the year. Why? Because, again, he wants Harry to figure it out. Just listen to this line from Dumbledore talking to Harry after everything's gone down. "Oh, you know about Nicholas," said Dumbledore, sounding quite delighted. "You did do the thing properly, didn't you? Well, Nicholas and I have had a little chat and agreed it's all for the best." Yeah, I think he sounds quite delighted because Harry went above and beyond what even Dumbledore expected in terms of research. And the thing he did properly was the task Dumbledore secretly set out for him. Even Flamel being okay with the stone being destroyed is kind of odd, because the fact is, Dumbledore can protect it effectively. You put that stone back in the mirror, it is completely safe. My bet is that Flamel decided well before the events of this book that he was ready to die and just allowed Dumbledore to use the stone as bait, I guess, to test Harry. But there you go, guys. That is part 1 of Dumbledore's big plan. Welcome to part 2 of Dumbledore's big plan. Chamber of Secrets is a much trickier year for Dumbledore's big plan because unlike Harry's first year, where Dumbledore pretty much set up the entire thing, he's having to react to a constantly developing situation in the Chamber of Secrets. Because as interfering as Dumbledore is, and as much danger as he was willing to put Harry in the first book, I do not think he is willing to subject the rest of the school to the Chamber of Secrets just so Harry can have a crack at whatever's inside there. For one, Dumbledore was actually around the last time the chamber was opened where somebody died, Moaning Myrtle. So if he wanted it open, he would actively be risking the life of everybody at the school. And one thing I know about Dumbledore, Harry Potter aside, is that he is not willing to put the rest of the students at risk. Like if we fast forward to Order of the Phoenix, Dumbledore allows Umbridge to reign her terror over the school until the moment she tries to physically harm one of the students. In that case, it is Marietta Edgecombe, Cho Chang's friend, who rats out the DA to Umbridge. This scene happens in Dumbledore's office where he is sitting idly by as the accusation occurs until Umbridge puts her hands on Marietta, at which point he is on his feet, wand out, temper flared. He is definitely not okay with harm coming to his students. Unless they're Harry. But hey, what are Phoenix tears even for? Am I right? And while Dumbledore is typically all-knowing about what's happening in the school, this is the first time he realizes Voldemort is using a Horcrux, but he doesn't actually even realize that until the very end of the book. And finally, he seems to genuinely not know the monster is a basilisk. Because if he did, certainly he could have at least offered up precautions against it, like using mirrors or probably sending the kids home. That's probably what he should have done. That, to me, feels like a reasonable precaution when instant death might be lurking around literally any corner. But again, he didn't realize it was a basilisk, so petrification, whatever. We have mandrakes for that. The real person to be suspicious of is Professor Sprout. How did she know they were going to need mandrakes that year? Coincidence? Sounds like it. They probably have them every year. I don't know. That said, though, once the chamber is open, we know that Dumbledore knows that Voldemort is behind it, even if he doesn't know how. In the hospital wing, after Harry is hit with the rogue bludger, he overhears Dumbledore saying, "The question is not who," said Dumbledore, his eyes on Carlin. "The question is how." And if you'll recall from the last video, I think Dumbledore adopts the same attitude towards Harry investigating the problem as he did in Philosopher's Stone. Again, the line is, "I don't think it was an accident he let me find out how the mirror worked. It's almost like he thought I had the right to face Voldemort if I could." So again, I don't think the opening of the Chamber of Secrets was part of Dumbledore's big plan at all, or even something he could have predicted. But once it was open, I think in the course of his own investigation, he was happy to let Harry investigate it as well, and even nudge him along if he could. So similar to Philosopher's Stone, I think Dumbledore had 3 main goals for Harry to accomplish in year 2, one of which really only comes into play after the chamber was open. That one was kind of a happy accident. Well, except for all the petrifications. Maybe a blessing in disguise? No, that doesn't feel right. Anyway, here are his goals for Harry. First is to keep his ego in check. Second is to teach him the disarming spell, which goes on to be his signature spell. And third, and this is the one that ends up being a silver lining, ooh yes, silver lining, that's it, is to test Harry's loyalty to Dumbledore himself. So let's start with keeping Harry's ego in check, because this is the most glaring and obvious one on the list, and it pretty much boils down to one thing: the hiring of Gilderoy Lockhart.
Pretty obvious.
Man, we need shirts that say pretty obvious.
Pretty obvious.
How do we not have that?
We do need shirts.
Does someone want to design that?
Obvious.
Tweet me. For Dumbledore, keeping Harry humble and modest is of the utmost importance. Because Dumbledore knows from personal experience that arrogance can lead down a dark and dangerous road. He tells Harry in Deathly Hallows, "It is a curious thing, Harry, but perhaps those who are best suited to power are those who have never sought it. Those who, like you, have leadership thrust upon them and take up the mantle because they must, and find to their own surprise that they wear it well." In that moment, Dumbledore is comparing Harry to himself at the same age, where instead of selflessly caring for his siblings after the death of their mother, he is plotting world domination and lusting after Grindelwald with the Deathly Hallows. Or wait, sorry, flip that. Lusting after the Deathly Hallows with Grindelwald. You know what? It works either way. Which, of course, ends in the unfortunate and untimely death of his sister. It was like a really bad 2 months for Dumbledore. But in his wisdom as an old, now dead man, he realizes that he arrived at that state having graduated Hogwarts as one of the most brilliant students ever, collecting trophies, being in touch with the most notable magical names of the day, and being pretty much adored since the moment he set foot in the school. And as such, it is immensely important from his perspective that Harry never have a big head about anything. And heading into his second year, Dumbledore would have a lot to contend with on this front. For one, Harry had a really good first year, popularity-wise. He saved the Philosopher's Stone, he defeated Voldemort, again. He was the youngest Quidditch player in a century and helped Gryffindor win the House Cup for the first time in at least 6 years. Plus, he's the son of James Potter, who was a notoriously popular and arrogant student. And as far as Dumbledore is concerned, this was supposed to be a pretty regular school year, so it might have been pretty easy for Harry to slip into a similar role as his father if it went unchecked. Especially when he starts the year by flying a car and crashing into a tree on the cool grounds, which I think we can all agree, pretty awesome. Dumbledore's solution, though? Hire Gilderoy Lockhart, a walking billboard of what Harry could become if he lets his ego inflate too much.
Let me introduce you to your new defense against the dark arts teacher. Me.
Because honestly, why else would you hire this guy?
Hardly any of you remember that my favorite color is lilac.
Dumbledore even says at the end of the book, after Lockhart obliterates his own memory, "Dear me," said Dumbledore, shaking his head, his long silver mustache quivering, "impaled upon your own sword, Gilderoy." Meaning he has known the entire time exactly what Lockhart was doing and that he is completely inept.
Pesky pixie pestonomy!
But if he knows that from the outset, then isn't it kind of irresponsible to have him teach all of your students for an entire year? Yes, it is very irresponsible. But of course you have to remember, Dumbledore's main goal is to defeat Voldemort, and teaching Harry this lesson is much more vital. Like I said, he's not okay putting his students in danger, but he is certainly okay with them sitting through ineptitude. And besides, he doesn't let Harry go entirely uneducated in defense against the dark arts that year, which brings me to point number 2, teaching him Expelliarmus. Tom, riddle me this. In what world would Severus Snape agree to be the assistant to Gilderoy Lockhart in a dueling club? You are correct. It would nope, not, nope, definitely would not, don't not, never happen. I don't know how many negatives that was, but for clarity, he wouldn't do it. Unless, that is, it was actually part of Dumbledore's big plan to ensure that Harry got at least one decent defense against the dark arts lesson that year. The dueling club meets all of one time and never happens again, but Harry still manages to walk away with 2 vital skills. 1, proper dueling etiquette, sort of, and 2, how to use the disarming spell.
Expelliarmus!
And that is why Dumbledore makes Snape assist. I mean, he's basically the best duelist in the entire series, and so who better to teach Harry how to disarm? Plus, Expelliarmus ties in perfectly with Dumbledore's first goal to keep Harry modest. It is simultaneously offensive and defensive, it ends fights early, and prevents the need for further violence. And sure enough, it becomes Harry's signature spell, and is even the one he uses to eventually finish Voldemort Voldemort off. But I think what is really important is that it stops the fight early and stops you from doing even more violence, because Dumbledore is constantly raving about the power of Harry's whole soul compared to that of Voldemort's tattered one. Lord Voldemort's soul, maimed as it is, cannot bear close contact with a soul like Harry's, like a tongue on frozen steel, like flesh and flame. It is essential that Harry's soul remain whole, so it is also very important that Dumbledore teaches him how to win fights against possibly deadly opponents without having to ever kill them, which is what we know rips your soul. And we see this practiced restraint pay off a lot. He doesn't kill Sirius, who ends up being innocent. He doesn't kill Peter Pettigrew, who later spares Harry's own life. He does foolishly use it against Stan Shunpike and give away the fact that he is the real Harry in the Battle of the Seven Potters, but in fairness, he does save Stan's life. I mean, come on, Harry, you had a golden opportunity here to stun Stan, and as he's falling down to earth, just yell back at him, "What you fell over for?" Which brings us to the final goal of Dumbledore's big plan, ensuring that Harry is truly loyal to Dumbledore himself. Remember from the last video that in deciding to meddle in Harry's preparations to face Voldemort, Dumbledore is also then asserting that he knows how best to defeat Voldemort, and that it is in Harry's best interest to listen to him at any cost, no matter what other information he may learn. And I think it's fair to say that at the beginning of Chamber of Secrets, this is not yet the case. Harry is not truly loyal to Dumbledore yet. Certainly, he has been told Dumbledore is the greatest wizard alive and is probably grateful to him for saving his life and definitely respects him. But as of yet, I don't think he has a reason to be specifically loyal to Dumbledore, and we see a great example of this early on when he fails to tell Dumbledore about hearing the voices in the walls. Dumbledore asks, "Is there anything you'd like to tell me? Anything at all?" Harry thought of the disembodied voice he had heard twice and remembered what Ron said. "Hearing voices no one else can hear isn't a good sign, even in the wizarding world." "No," said Harry. "There isn't anything, Professor." And the fact that this exchange mirrors the conversation Dumbledore has with Tom Riddle 50 years earlier must have Dumbledore kind of shaking in his boots.
Is there something you wish to tell me?
No, sir. Nothing.
Like, here's a young boy who has already proven he is very important to the wizarding community, but has also proven that he's very brave and bold and capable. Harry's lack of trust in telling Dumbledore the truth could be a very worrisome indicator that he has not yet decided what path he's going to go down. But Harry's loyalty to Dumbledore is crucial because, again, Dumbledore is the only one who knows the prophecy and is therefore uniquely qualified to guide him down the correct path with no ulterior motive. And I think Dumbledore is wise enough to see points in the future where other influential wizards may try and sway Harry according to their own agenda, like Rufus Scrimgeour when he tries to recruit Harry as a spokesperson for the ministry. Which again underlines the importance of humility, as a more fame-hungry Harry may have enjoyed the attention of the Minister of Magic. "Well, it's clear to me that he has done a very good job on you," said Scrimgeour, his eyes cold and hard behind his wire-rimmed glasses. "Dumbledore's man through and through, aren't you, Potter?" "Yeah, I am," said Harry. "Glad we straightened that out." The moment Dumbledore puts his plan in motion to test Harry's loyalty to him is when Lucius Malfoy comes to the school to escort Dumbledore away. He says, "You will find that I will only truly have left this school when none here are loyal to me. You will also find that help will always be given at Hogwarts to those who ask for it." For a second, Harry was almost sure Dumbledore's eyes flickered towards the corner where he and Ron stood hidden. This is what I meant earlier when I said Dumbledore is happy to allow Harry to also investigate the Chamber of Secrets. First of all, he obviously knows that Harry and Ron are in the cabin, even though they're underneath the invisibility cloak. And second, even though he's leaving the school, he seems to have a pretty good idea that Harry is on the case and offers him some potential help if he solves the entire mystery and then needs some assistance. And in the end, we know that Harry does become very loyal and pledge his allegiance to Dumbledore because he's able to summon Fawkes in the Chamber of Secrets. The question, though, is how does Dumbledore earn his loyalty? And I think the answer is Hagrid.
You wouldn't be talking about me now, would you?
Dumbledore, of course, as we said earlier, knows for sure that Voldemort opened the chamber last time and that Hagrid was framed. And yet, despite pretty compelling evidence to the contrary, Dumbledore decides to trust Hagrid and keep him on as gamekeeper. A move that must have looked very sketchy to an outsider. Like, what do you think Myrtle's parents thought of that decision? But once Harry learns that Hagrid is indeed innocent, it must look to Harry like this was a true act of loyalty from Dumbledore towards Hagrid.
Hagrid never opened the Chamber of Secrets. He was innocent.
And that, in turn, is what makes Harry loyal to Dumbledore. Welcome to part 3 of Dumbledore's big plan, The Prisoner of Azkaban. In Prisoner, Dumbledore once again finds himself in a much more reactionary role. Whatever his original plans for Harry were that year now have to be adjusted based on the escape of Sirius Black. However, unlike in Chamber, Sirius escapes well before the beginning of the school year, so we can assume that most of the decisions Dumbledore makes are taking into account the fact that Sirius is at large and might be trying to kill Harry, and that Harry might find out what Sirius did to his parents, or at least what Dumbledore thinks Sirius did to his parents. And with that in mind, I think it might be a good idea to review what Dumbledore knows and doesn't know, and what he believes at the beginning of the book, because it affects the actions he takes. Firstly, much like the rest of the Wizarding world, Dumbledore definitely believes Sirius is guilty. He also believes that he was the Potter's secret keeper, that he did turn them into Voldemort, and did kill Peter Pettigrew and 12 other Muggles. He also has no idea that James, Sirius, or Peter were animagus. He tells Harry, "Last night Sirius told me all about how they became animagi," said Dumbledore, smiling. "An extraordinary achievement, not least keeping it quiet from me." Without any further ado, let's talk about Dumbledore's big plan for the Prisoner of Azkaban and the goals he has outlined for Harry. First and foremost is to protect Harry and just keep him safe from Sirius. Second is to observe Harry's greatest fear and to teach him how to defeat Dementors, which, spoilers, this ends up working out really well for him because his greatest fear ends up being Dementors. And lastly is the value of someone's soul and their innocence. Okay, so let's start with keeping Harry safe. Remember, Dumbledore is the only one who is aware of the prophecy and knows that Harry is the one who has to kill Voldemort. So Sirius coming in and killing him ahead of time is very bad for the fate of the Wizarding world. But Jay, I hear you saying, doesn't the prophecy also say that only Voldemort can kill Harry? That either must die at the hand of the other, for neither can live while the other survives? Yes, it does say that, and this is a little bit tricky, but stick with me. This does not mean that Harry is simply invincible to all non-Voldemort related deaths, that he is somehow indestructible except at the hands of Voldemort, who, ironically, he actually is indestructible again since Voldemort took his blood in Goblet of Fire.
Astonishing what a few drops of your blood will do.
But Voldemort isn't even aware of the second half of the prophecy where it says neither can live while the other survives. He is just determined to kill Harry because the first sentence is the one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches. But because he acts on those words, he does mark Harry as the only person who can't defeat him. And in a weird twist of fate, his own determination to be the one to kill Harry often saves Harry from otherwise certain death. Like when the Death Eaters have him surrounded at the Ministry of Magic, or when Nagini is squeezing the life out of him at Godric's Hollow, or Bellatrix and the Malfoys have him cornered at Malfoy Manor. I mean, the list goes on, but Harry escapes a lot of times because Voldemort won't let anyone else kill him.
Do nothing! He's mine to finish!
The point is, Voldemort believes in the prophecy, and so no matter what, he is going to try and kill Harry. So no matter what, Harry has to be prepared for it, which he can't do if he's dead because he can still die, which is why Dumbledore sees Sirius as such a big problem. From Dumbledore's point of view, Sirius was one of the most talented wizards to come through Hogwarts. He was a huge supporter of Voldemort, who gave up his best friends, James and Lily. He is the only person to break out of Azkaban and is a reckless killer of innocent people. So, step one for Dumbledore to protect Harry is to take full advantage of the protection offered at number 4 Privet Drive. Plain and simple, when Harry is here, he is basically untouchable until the age of 17. But take notice, Prisoner is unique in that it is the only book, except Philosopher's Stone, where Harry is not invited to the Weasleys during the summer. We've talked before about how Molly and Arthur are Dumbledore's deputies, and I think this lack of an invitation is at his request. In fact, I dare say it's possible he suggested they take the trip to Egypt so they would have a reasonable excuse to not invite Harry over. Which would honestly make me feel a little bit better, because I don't know about you, but it has always bothered me that the very poor Weasleys win this big lottery draw at the Ministry and then immediately squander it on this trip to Egypt. Like, what? Especially when you realize that in Chamber, the reason Ron and Ginny and Fred and George and Percy all stay at Hogwarts is because Arthur and Molly are visiting Bill in Egypt. Like, they were just there. And in fact, it says that the siblings elected to not go with them, meaning they could have gone with them. So I'm just calling total malarkey on them needing the money to be able to go visit them with the whole family. But Dumbledore's plan to keep Harry safe and away from Sirius Black flies right out the window when Harry accidentally inflates his aunt, who flies right out the window, and then Harry flees and runs directly into Sirius Black. Fortunately for Dumbledore, though, Harry accidentally summons the night bus, which immediately delivers him into Ministry protection. Or perhaps not so fortunately. I mean, can you imagine if Harry had just not tripped right there and Sirius had revealed himself to him?
Harry, don't be afraid. It is I, Sirius Black, your godfather. I was framed for murder, but the man who did it is alive, and he's posing as a rat with a family called the Weasleys.
Oh, you know them. Your best friend? That is convenient. Seriously, Harry, what you fell over for? You could have ended this book like 300 pages earlier. And stopped Voldemort from coming back. For that matter, if Sirius hadn't seen Peter's picture in the newspaper, he never would have escaped for Azkaban, and Peter never would have returned to Voldemort. So like, whose idea was it to go to Egypt anyway? Oh. Anyway, Harry gets delivered to Diagon Alley, where it seems like the public nature of the area plus the Ministry itself is offering him protection. Not that Dumbledore doesn't have eyes on the ground, as always. Let me ask you this. Did you ever think it was odd that Florian Fortescue kept giving Harry so many free Sundays during his lengthy stay at the Leaky Cauldron? Because that is not how you run a successful ice cream business. It might seem weird, except that it is a great way to keep an eye on Harry, because guess whose ancestor happened to be a headmaster at Hogwarts? One Florian Fortescue. Meaning his ancestor, Dexter Fortescue, has a portrait in the headmaster's office, and I would just bet money that he has another one in the ice cream shop and that Dumbledore was just getting reports. A trick we know he uses later on with Phineas Nigellus. Side note, does anyone else think it's odd that there were no Dementors in Diagon Alley that summer? Like, Sirius had escaped. They know he's looking for Harry. They know Harry's in Diagon Alley. Where are the Dementors? In any case, though, the Weasleys do eventually arrive in Diagon Alley to escort Harry to the platform where Mr. Weasley pulls Harry aside to deliver Dumbledore's next bit of instruction. He tells him specifically to not go looking for Black. He tells him this even though Fudge specifically told him not to. Harry says, "No, honestly, it's okay. This way you haven't broken your word to Fudge and I know what's going on." Fudge might have told him not to tell Harry anything, but I think Dumbledore did. And if you're wondering why, if they both work for Dumbledore, Molly and Arthur were arguing about this the night before, well, it won't be the last time that Molly disagrees with Dumbledore about what's best for Harry to know. Then, of course, once Harry gets to school, Dumbledore tries to protect Harry by preventing him from going into Hogsmeade.
No permission form signed, no visiting the village.
Because if you ask me, the permission forms are kind of just a formality, and if Black wasn't out there, I think he would just let Harry enter Hogsmeade no problem. I mean, in the past 2 years, he's defeated a basilisk and Voldemort, but hey, walking around a town, whoa, can't do it without a permission form. But what about the Marauders map, you might be wondering? Is it possible that Dumbledore intended the twins to give it to him? Well, we did consider this, but ultimately, no. I mean, for one, if Dumbledore had the map, he could just use it to track Sirius. And two, next year, when Barty Crouch Jr. mentions the map to Dumbledore, he has no idea what he's talking about. The map that had almost ruined everything. Map, said Dumbledore quickly. What map is this? Potter's map of Hogwarts. Potter saw me on it. Point is, even though most of Dumbledore's attempts to protect Harry are failing, he is trying. Which brings us to his second goal of learning Harry's greatest fear, teaching him how to fight Dementors, and the hiring of Remus John Lupin. There are a myriad of reasons I think Lupin was the perfect hire for Harry this year, but let's start with learning his greatest fear. Learning what Harry sees when he comes face to face with a boggart is sort of the opposite of finding out what Harry saw in the Mirror of Erised in Philosopher's Stone. But both pieces of information really reveal a lot about Harry's character to Dumbledore.
That suggests that what you fear the most is fear itself. This is very wise.
Although I will say, I'm not sure Lupin was in on that part of the plan because he eventually stops Harry from seeing the boggart. Unless that was also part of his plan so he could have a more isolated encounter with Harry later. Which is exactly what happens the first time everyone else gets to go to Hogsmeade and Harry can't, which is something else Dumbledore made happen. But the big giveaway that Dumbledore is actually the one behind the boggart lesson comes from Crimes of Grindelwald, where you can see Dumbledore teaching the exact same lesson. And come on, the boggart was found in a wardrobe in the staff room. Like, how random. The really great news for Dumbledore, though, is that Harry's boggart is a Dementor, which ties in really well with his goal of teaching Harry how to fight Dementors. Now, I don't know about you, but I've always thought the argument Harry uses to convince Lupin to teach him this skill is like paper thin at best. But if they come to another Quidditch match, I need to be able to fight them. Yeah, Harry, because it is your responsibility as one of the students playing the game to defend yourself from attacking dark creatures. Don't worry about the staff handling that. I mean, to be fair, Harry's attacked in like every single year of Quidditch. No one ever seems to do anything about it or look into it at all. Either way, Harry's argument is we might lose Quidditch matches, not I might die. And Lupin, who is already hesitant to teach him, is like, oh, that's true. We can't have you losing Quidditch matches. Yeah, no, I'm sorry. This has Dumbledore just written all over it. Now, Dumbledore wanting Harry to know how to fight Dementors might seem really specific, but it's not. I mean, for one, Dementors are really dangerous, and Dumbledore is certain that if and when Voldemort returns, the Dementors will join him immediately. In fact, he even tells Fudge after Voldemort does return, the first and most essential step is to remove Azkaban from the control of the Dementors. He states, the rest of us sleep less soundly in our beds, Cornelius, knowing that you have put Lord Voldemort's most dangerous supporters in the care of creatures who will join him the instant he asks them. I mean, it is literally his very first suggestion for how to fight Voldemort is to not trust Dementors. And since he believes one Death Eater has already broken out, he probably feels like the return is coming pretty quickly. Which it is. But it is essential that they do not get to Harry, because Harry losing his soul pretty much means Voldemort wins. And it actually wouldn't even interfere with the prophecy because they wouldn't actually be killing him. They'd just be taking his soul. And Lupin is not just the man who knows all about Patronuses, but he's also a great candidate for teaching Harry the value of someone's soul. Remember, as of Chamber of Secrets, Dumbledore would have been suspecting that multiple Horcruxes were in play and realized that Voldemort had made a grave error in ripping his soul into so many pieces. But that advantage could disappear if Harry doesn't learn the value of having a whole, complete soul. In Chamber, Dumbledore hired Lockhart to show Harry how someone who has all the things most people think they want can be a total buffoon. But in Prisoner, it's the exact opposite. It's to show Harry how someone who is considered vicious and an outcast by the entire wizarding community can have a truly pure heart. Lupin, who is poor and unwanted in most wizarding spaces and who believes that Sirius is actually guilty, is the one to tell Harry about the Dementor's kiss and how it's the fate that awaits Sirius Black. He deserves it, said Harry suddenly. You think so? Said Lupin lightly. Do you really think anyone deserves that? Yes, said Harry defiantly. For some things. And yet, by the end of the book, Harry has done a complete 180. By the end, he is unwilling to let Sirius and Lupin murder Peter, even though at that point he has fully accepted that Peter is the one who actually turned his parents over to Voldemort, and that he's been hiding as a rat and living in Harry's dormitory for the past 3 years. I mean, think about that. Earlier in the book, Harry was very quick to offer up Sirius to the Dementors, but by the end, he is not willing to let someone whose crimes are even worse suffer a fate that is not as bad. And not even just because he doesn't think Peter deserves it, but also because he doesn't want Lupin and Sirius to become murderers. Maintaining their souls and their innocence is just as important to him. And Dumbledore's method of teaching Harry this lesson throughout the year is once again through Hagrid. Of course, Harry had a crash course in protecting someone's innocence last year when he cleared Hagrid's name from the Chamber of Secrets. But this year, Dumbledore has Hagrid inform the Golden Trio every step of the way about Buckbeak's trial. A trial that certainly Dumbledore could have cleared up in like 15 minutes after breakfast one day if he'd really wanted to. I mean, people are injured at this school all the time. And Malfoy is injured by a beast that comes up during OWL, so it's the kind of creature that lots of adult wizards already have a lot of information about. Plus, Hagrid has a whole class worth of witnesses who heard him tell Draco not to insult the hippogriff, which then they all also heard him do. Actually, Draco is not even hurt. Like, it is such a dumb case. But it is a clear situation where an innocent party is going to be punished by murder, which then happens to be a great lesson for Harry to learn the value of innocence. Later, when Harry is feeling like he failed because he let Pettigrew go, Dumbledore tells him, "Didn't make any difference," said Dumbledore quietly. "It made all the difference in the world, Harry. You helped uncover the truth. You saved an innocent man from a terrible fate." So the real lesson is this: saving innocent lives is more important than punishing guilty ones, even if that means the return of Voldemort. An idea that really rings true when you fast forward to Harry walking to the forest to die for his innocent friends, knowing he has not yet completely defeated his enemy. Guys, welcome to part 4 of Dumbledore's Big Plan, where today we're going to be discussing Goblet of Fire. We pick up after the highly impactful events of Prisoner of Azkaban, where Peter Pettigrew has escaped and set out to resurrect Voldemort. And once more, Dumbledore has his own goals for Harry as he heads towards his inevitable duel with Voldemort. The one for like all the marbles, that is, though, not the one in the graveyard. Dumbledore has no idea that's gonna happen. In fact, I dare say Goblet stands apart in a big way from the first 3 in terms of stuff Dumbledore doesn't plan for. In the last 2 books, he has had to act in a somewhat reactionary role where he is responding to a developing situation, those being the Chamber of Secrets being opened and Sirius Black escaping from Azkaban. This time, however, he is much more in the dark. Like, while it is clear there is a situation developing, he has no idea who or how it's happening. In fact, Dumbledore is so not in control this year, we honestly considered calling this episode Voldemort's Big Plan. Except in that case, you wouldn't really need us to explain anything because that's the whole book. It's just the whole book is Voldemort's Big Plan. The whole thing is spelled out.
Bertha Jorkins.
Barty Crouch.
We relight the Goblet of Fire.
Harry's the champion.
Did you put your name in the Goblet of Fire?
No way, the cup is a porky.
Harry's blood. Avada Kedavra.
That's where it goes wrong. But that's not to say Dumbledore doesn't have any plans in this book, because he totally does. This book actually contains one of the most crucial lines that actually confirms Dumbledore's plan in the entire series. So today I would like to start at the end, during the end of year feast, when Dumbledore is giving his speech to the entire school, because he says something that I feel like really sums up everything he's trying to teach Harry that year.
I say to you all once again, in the light of Lord Voldemort's return, we are only as strong as we are united, as weak as we are divided. Lord Voldemort's gift for spreading discord and enmity is very great. We can fight it only by showing an equally strong bond of friendship and trust. Differences of habit and language are nothing at all if our aims are identical and our hearts are open.
Friendship, unity, trust. These are the hallmarks of the goals Dumbledore has for Harry this year. Friendship, unity, trust. If you need an acronym, try FUT. It's almost like fun and not at all tough. His first goal is to introduce Harry to the wider wizarding world and start promoting the idea of unity. Second is to educate Harry about the unforgivable curses. And third, and this one is a bit more reactionary, is to start showing Harry what the world was like the last time Lord Voldemort was in power. So let's start with expanding Harry's horizons and giving him a greater scope of what's at stake should Lord Voldemort return. This is super important for Harry's future because thus far, most of his exposure to the wizarding world is just Hogwarts, and if we're being real, mostly just Gryffindor House, where he has indeed blossomed into the brave Gryffindor Dumbledore intended. He's won the House Cup 3 years in a row, he's received an award for special services to the school, and he even brought home the Inter-House Quidditch Cup. But the issue with Hogwarts being most of your exposure is that Hogwarts itself is a pretty divided place. Sure, Dumbledore didn't want him to end up in Slytherin House, but that doesn't mean Dumbledore actually thinks any lesser of the students in Slytherin House. Well, I mean, let's be honest, there was probably a nicer way to award the points at the end of the first year. I mean, it's not like the Slytherins actually did anything wrong. He didn't have to embarrass them in front of the whole school, but the point is, he did. Sorry, that's actually not the point. The point is, if Dumbledore had it his way, all 4 houses would coexist harmoniously. So Dumbledore approaches this in 2 ways. Right out of the gate, that'll make sense in like 1 sentence, the Weasleys arrive in the Dursleys' fireplace. Ha, there it is. Fireplaces have grates, you see. Although, ironically, they don't actually even make it out of the grate in this situation, but whatever. I stand by that pun. Either way, they are there to pick up Harry for the Quidditch World Cup. This is a huge deal for the oh-so-poor Weasleys, who have somehow managed to not just get tickets to the event, but also tickets for guests, and also they're the best tickets in the entire stadium in the top box, which for me is just one old big red flag. The top box? What? Really? Okay, so we know that tickets come as a gift from Ludo Bagman, and the explanation is that he is returning a favor to Arthur because Arthur got his brother out of a weird situation with a lawnmower that was acting unnaturally, and he just smoothed the whole thing over. Here's 10 tickets to the top box. I'm sorry, but I just don't think so. I mean, 10 tickets to the top box. Like, that's where the Malfoys sit, and the Malfoys are like peacock-owning rich. I'm just assuming peacocks are like really expensive. No, let me tell you, as someone who personally started their career in event marketing, the tickets the event gives you to give away are rarely good tickets. Certainly they are not front row tickets unless there is also a huge marketing campaign accompanying that particular giveaway that's gonna help you sell lots of other tickets. The idea that Ludo is giving away 10 of the best tickets in the entire stadium for a favor he is like twice removed from is just laughable, especially, and this is really important, when you consider that Ludo Bagman is in terrible debt when he does this. Selling those tickets rather than giving them to Arthur would have been easily the fastest way out of debt. I mean, when Peacock Man and his son Draco get to the top box, they even joke. "Good Lord, Arthur," he said softly, "what did you have to sell to get seats in the top box? Surely your house wouldn't have fetched this much." Now, obviously he's being quite antagonistic in this situation, but I have to think he is also quite correct. Just fun fact, according to StubHub, the average cost of the worst tickets to go to the last Super Bowl was $4,750, with private boxes ranging all the way up to $60,000. I'm sorry, but I need to know because this is important. What was that lawnmower doing? The point is, Ludo is desperate for money and is just willing to help Harry cheat for the entirety of the book, and yet he gives away essentially a small fortune? It just doesn't sound right. Except we also know that he has been working with Dumbledore for the past few months arranging the Triwizard Tournament. And if you ask me, Dumbledore is the one behind this generosity because it is vital that Harry go to the Quidditch World Cup, and if he isn't able to go with the Weasleys, then he doesn't really have anyone else to go with. That might sound like a weird and big favor to ask of Ludo Bagman, but at this point, and we'll get into it a little bit more later, Dumbledore already believes that Harry is going to have to sacrifice himself. So it is vital that he understand the scope of Voldemort's terror should Harry fail to defeat him. And speaking of the Triwizard Tournament, that is part 2 of Dumbledore's plan to expose Harry to the wider wizarding world. Because if things had gone to plan and Harry's name hadn't come out of the Goblet of Fire, then it would have been a great opportunity not just to meet foreign wizards, but also to unite all 4 houses within Hogwarts behind one champion. And speaking of of the Triwizard Tournament, that is part 2 of Dumbledore's plan to expose Harry to the wider wizarding world. It's honestly a really elegant and creative solution where everyone might have got to have a lot of fun and meet some new inner house friends and international wizards, except it all goes astray when Harry's name comes out of the Goblet of Fire and the school ends up more divided than ever. Whoopsies. Speaking of whoops though, let's dive into goal number 2, which is educating Harry about the unforgivable curses. So typically you wouldn't start learning about these until year 6, but now that Pettigrew has escaped, Dumbledore must feel that Voldemort's return is imminent and that he really needs to get Harry in front of this information now. Now, I've always kind of thought the actual explanation for the reason Barty Crouch Jr. was teaching the students the unforgivable curses was because he's actually a Death Eater, and the idea of putting students under the Imperius Curse all day was just sort of a laugh for him. But the more I think about it, and the more I look at Dumbledore's plan as a whole, the more I think Dumbledore actually did want Moody to teach the students about these curses. I mean, first of all, he is under the impression that it is the actual Alastor Moody teaching the students. And Barty Crouch Jr. even says, Professor Dumbledore's got a higher opinion of your nerves. He reckons you can cope. And I say, the sooner you know what you're up against, the better. I don't know when in my mind Moody became a pirate, but he does have a peg leg. And could wear a patch. Maybe should. And you might be thinking, but Jay, surely he's just lying and Dumbledore wouldn't actually approve of this. But here's the thing. There's like no way Dumbledore does not know this is being taught, because the whole school is buzzing with what Moody's classes are like because they're so intense. And it's not like he just teaches them at once. It's like several lessons. Dumbledore definitely knows this is happening and does nothing to stop it, which can only mean Barty Crouch Jr. is telling the truth, including the part about putting the students under the Imperius Curse. Yes, it sounds terrible, but terrible is what Dumbledore is up against in Voldemort. And sure enough, this early training does pay off for Harry, who later is actually able to successfully throw off the Imperius Curse when Voldemort casts it on him. And besides that, Barty Crouch Jr. also tells us that it takes real strength of character to throw off the curse, which Dumbledore definitely knows Harry has based on what he saw in the mirror. So I feel certain Dumbledore knew Harry could do it, just wanted him to have a few rounds of practice ahead of time. Plus, if Voldemort does return, you can bet tons of people are suddenly going to be under the Imperius Curse, and being able to recognize it is really important because it encourages restraint. Think Stan's Shunpike, for example, during the Battle of the Seven Potters, who Harry spares because he recognizes the Imperius Curse. But that brings me to goal number 3, showing Harry what the wizarding world was like the last time Voldemort was at large. Like I said earlier, this is not something he would have planned from the beginning. It's much more reactionary, but since Dumbledore has been reading the signs the whole book, I think he feels like it's a good idea to pass this information along to Harry. This happens when Harry accidentally discovers and enters the pensive in Dumbledore's office and witnesses the trials of Karkaroff, Bagman, and Barty Crouch Jr. And I say accidentally with air quotes because it is so not an accident. I was using the pensive when Mr. Fudge arrived for our meeting and put it away rather hastily. Undoubtedly, I did not fasten the cabinet door properly. Naturally, it would have attracted your attention. Yes, naturally, it is totally fine for you to invade my private thoughts and observe sensitive information about the innocence of living people who you're seeing on a regular basis. Totally fine, cool, awesome, great. No, but for real, Harry, did you see what was going on there? I hope you were paying attention. I could run to the bathroom and forget to fasten the handle again if you need. I kind of have to go. Actually, I better. That's better. Certainly it doesn't seem like Dumbledore cares that Harry saw this. The only thing that really catches him off guard is when he learns that Neville hasn't told Harry about his parents, which is the only thing he asked him to keep a secret. But the reason I think Dumbledore wants Harry to see this is not to just throw shade at the accused, but to show Harry how Voldemort was able to spread such terrible mistrust through the wizarding community. On Voldemort's side of things, Karkaroff reveals that the Death Eaters don't even really have loyalty to each other. They're willing to turn on each other if it benefits themselves in the long run. I mean, it's not really that surprising, but there it is. Bagman's trial represents how an obviously oblivious and innocent person has been cast under serious doubt and suspicion, which again kind of echoes back to that idea with Stan Shumpike. Harry immediately recognizes this person's not a Death Eater. I mean, I don't know if he's a good guy. Don't let him near your lawnmower, but. And then, of course, is the trial with Barty Crouch Jr., which shows us the breaking of families, which shows how even people who claim to be on the good side of things are willing to shatter bonds and mistrust even their own children. You really can't understate how instructive and important these three memories are for Harry going forward. Think, for example, how Harry responds to Lupin when he asks if he can abandon his family to come join Harry and Hermione and Ron. Harry ain't having none of it. But that brings us to the Gleam, possibly the most important line in this whole book as it relates to Dumbledore's plan. For a fleeting instant, Harry thought he saw a gleam of something like triumph in Dumbledore's eyes, but next second, Harry was sure he had imagined it. For when Dumbledore had returned to his seat behind the desk, he looked as old and wary as Harry had ever seen him. This triumphant gleam of Dumbledore's comes immediately upon hearing that Voldemort took some of Harry's blood into himself. And the triumph is Dumbledore realizing that for the first time, Harry might actually have a way to survive the final duel with Voldemort. It's Dumbledore realizing that Voldemort is now sort of acting as a love crux, if you will, to Harry and tethering him to life. But if Voldemort used the killing curse and nobody died for me this time, how can I be alive? I think you know, said Dumbledore. Think back. Remember what he did in his ignorance, in his greed, and his cruelty. He took my blood, said Harry. It means that as of Goblet of Fire, Dumbledore already knew Harry was a Horcrux and that he would have to die in order to defeat Voldemort, that Harry would have to sacrifice himself.
You've kept him alive so that he can die at the proper moment. You've been raising him like a pig for slaughter.
And this is the reason why it is tantamount that Harry understand what is at stake. That when the time comes, Harry will need to have the courage to face death. Because it's not just about Harry's personal battle with Voldemort. It's not just about killing Voldemort or saving Harry. It's about saving the entire wizarding world. Harry has to understand the gravity of the situation so that he can do the other thing Dumbledore asks everyone to do at his end of feast speech. If the time should come when you have to make a choice between what is right and what is easy, remember what happened to a boy who was good and kind and brave because he strayed across the path of Lord Voldemort. Until the end of Goblet of Fire, Dumbledore doesn't know Harry might have a way to survive the final duel. He believes he's going to have to die, which means he has to count on Harry in that moment to do not what is easy, but what is right. Guys, welcome to part 5 of Dumbledore's Big Plan, where today we are going to be discussing the Order of the Phoenix. Well, it took 4 books to get here, but Voldemort has finally returned, and yet somehow he's not even the main villain in this book. I mean, what does that say about Umbridge? I think a lot. One of those would be good. Which is not to say that Voldemort doesn't still have a presence in the book, and Harry is still the one who's gonna have to finish him off, and so Dumbledore is still doing his darndest to prepare Harry for the inevitable. Unlike the last few books though, this time Dumbledore has the benefit of knowing exactly what Voldemort is up to. Trying to steal the prophecy. And since not knowing the contents of the prophecy is what is presently stopping Voldemort from attacking Harry, Dumbledore's main goal is to protect the prophecy. And this goal ties into a few of his goals for Harry this year, all of which now have to be adjusted a little since Voldemort has actually returned. But what's really interesting about this book is that now that Voldemort is back, you actually get to see some of Dumbledore's past lessons be put to the test. Oh, Dumbledore, in many ways, I think you are your own worst enemy in this book, a sentiment I think you are actually quite aware of.
Do you see, Harry? Do you see the flaw in my brilliant plan now? I had fallen into the trap I had foreseen, that I had told myself I could avoid, that I must avoid.
Fall you did, Dumbledore. Fall you did. Well, not literally. That's not until the next book. I mean, like, oh no! Too soon? Either way, the point is, it's not that your intentions weren't good. We'll get more into that quote later, but I wanted to bring it up right at the start because I feel like it really sets the tone for all of Dumbledore's goals for Harry this year, which are, first, similar to how it was in Prisoner of Azkaban, is to keep Harry safe. Second is to demonstrate the corruption of the ministry and maybe encourage a little rebellion. And lastly is to finally tell Harry the contents of the prophecy and why Voldemort is after him. Which, let's be real, it is about time. Well, it's a good thing we saved the Philosopher's Stone, but why did Voldemort try and kill me as a baby? I know, Philosopher's Stone, right? Harry, I swear I had some Birdie Bot's beans here. Wow, Professor, I can't believe I killed a basilisk, but why did Voldemort try and kill me as a baby? Dude, have you seen this sword? This thing is awesome. How much do you think we could sell it for? Wow, can you believe time travel's real? And Voldemort's coming back because Pettigrew escaped. I really would like to know why he tried to kill me. Hippogriffs are as hippogriffs do, Harry, and maybe have some chocolate. It helps for the Dementors. Cedric is dead. Why did he keep trying to kill me? Oh God, he's crying. I think I left those beans back in my office. I'm just gonna... In other news, what do you guys think of my new COVID mask? But okay, let's dive into Dumbledore's first goal, keeping Harry safe. People don't like being locked up. You did it to me all last summer. A truly wonderful sentiment that really drives home how much Dumbledore has fallen into his own trap. Voldemort's return means that Harry is in as much danger as he has ever been in. And since Dumbledore is still the only one who knows the contents of the prophecy, he needs Harry alive and safe and well. So, unlike last summer where Harry got to go to the Quidditch World Cup, this summer Dumbledore decides that it's better if Harry is left completely isolated the entire time. This is because, as Dumbledore explains, while you can still call home the place where your mother's blood dwells, there you cannot be touched or harmed by Voldemort. So, as far as Dumbledore is concerned, keeping Harry at number 4 Privet Drive as long as possible is the safest possible place Harry could be. Why he doesn't just tell Harry that this protection is in place is beyond me, but hey, at least in the meantime, he's got Mundungus and Mrs. Fig spying on him without Harry knowing the whole time. Wait. But of course, this plan goes totally astray when Harry and Dudley get attacked by a pair of Dementors. And this is an important distinction because at this point, the Dementors are still loyal to the Ministry. So while Harry is protected from Voldemort at Privet Drive, if he's also under attack from the Ministry, then it's time to move Harry again. But let's face it, the protection is significantly downgraded to Grimmauld Place, am I right? Yeah, right. Are you telling me the Fidelius Charm and the core elite Aurors from the Order of the Phoenix being around Harry 24/7, having his best interest at heart, is better than Mrs. Fig? Yeah. After arriving at the headquarters of the Order of the Phoenix, Harry learns they are protecting a weapon that everyone is also refusing to tell him anything about, which is round 2 of Harry's protection, because you might just be wondering, why doesn't Dumbledore just tell Harry about the prophecy? Because, like, if he'd known, then he wouldn't have been lured to the Ministry and he would have just been like, in on everything, and Sirius maybe didn't need to die. The answer, though, is pretty simple. We talked last week about how Dumbledore already suspected that Harry was a Horcrux. So the reason Dumbledore doesn't tell him is because he's afraid then Voldemort will be able to access his mind and gain the information about the prophecy. Or at least we know that's Dumbledore's theory at this point, because after Arthur is attacked, Molly says, "You know, Dumbledore almost seems to have been waiting for Harry to see something like this." And said attack actually seems to confirm this theory to Dumbledore after he consults his little spinning silver instruments. "A serpent's head grew out of the end of it, opening its mouth wide. Naturally, naturally," murmured Dumbledore, apparently to himself, still observing the stream of smoke without the slightest sign of surprise. "But in essence, divided?" This is when Dumbledore decides to implement occlumency lessons for Harry with his least favorite teacher ever, Snape. Now, of course, Dumbledore later claims that the reason he does this is to prevent Voldemort from luring Harry to the Hall of Prophecy. But I think the real reason Dumbledore wants Harry to know occlumency is because he has finally come to accept that it's the only safe way he will be able to tell Harry the prophecy. Because Dumbledore can't tell Harry until he knows he can repel Voldemort, because otherwise Voldemort will have access to it. Of course, if it was me, I might have told Harry that was the situation like
hey, if you master this skill, I can actually tell you what the weapon is. But this is where Dumbledore really falters, because Snape sees that Harry is having dreams about the door, and he's obviously telling Dumbledore what he's seeing. I mean, if nothing else, occlumency lessons are like a really sneaky way of spying into Harry's mind. But even just like telling him not to go there, telling him Voldemort might try and lure him there. Like, why, Dumbledore? Why? But the reason is because of that tragic flaw in Dumbledore's plan. The reason he doesn't want to tell Harry about the prophecy is because he has grown to care for Harry too much. What did I care if numbers of nameless and faceless people and creatures were slaughtered in the vague future, if in the here and now you were alive and well and happy? Dumbledore is basically at war with himself. He has to physically keep Harry alive so that he can kill Voldemort, but his determination to mentally protect Harry from that burden prevents him from being honest with him, which makes Harry stop trusting him as much, which ultimately really undermines his second goal, which is to demonstrate the corruption of the Ministry.
The Cruciatus curse ought to loosen your tongue.
That's illegal.
Okay, so according to Educational Decree number 22, in the event of the current headmaster being unable to provide a candidate for a teaching post, the Ministry should select an appropriate person. This, as we all know, is the reason we are stuck with Umbridge. Or is it? Could it instead be the case that Umbridge is actually part of Dumbledore's big plan? Yeah. That's the case. Maybe Dumbledore didn't specifically have Umbridge in mind, but yes, he wanted them to appoint somebody. Let me ask you this. Does it strike you as at all odd that Dumbledore, the leader of the Order of the Phoenix, a secret defense against the dark arts society, can't find a teacher for the post of defense against the dark arts? I mean, it is literally where he pulled the last two from. Lupin and Mad-Eye are both members of the Order. I mean, granted, Moody didn't like totally work out and Lupin like could have killed somebody as a werewolf, but like whatever. But like Dumbledore knows Voldemort is back. There could not be a more important subject for his students than defense against the dark arts. And like, even if the members of the Order of the Phoenix don't want the job, like tough cookies. That's part of being in the Order. You just do what Dumbledore says. The next year, he literally has Order members stationed at Hogwarts. Why isn't one stationed as the defense against the dark arts professor this year? In fact, next year, he does do that. With Snape. Here is my list, my short list, it could be longer, of potential candidates that Dumbledore underutilized for this position. Kingsley Shacklebolt, Daedalus Diggle, Elphias Doge, Emmeline Vance, Sturgis Podmore, Arthur Weasley, Bill Weasley, Charlie Weasley, Hestia Jones, Tonks, Fleur Delacour, A Wet Plant, Dobby, Gilderoy Lockhart again, the actual Mad-Eye Moody, and this would have been my actual favorite, wait for it, Molly Weasley. Yes, Molly, who doesn't even appear to go out on missions for the Order of the Phoenix and who I'm sure would have liked to have been close to her children during these uncertain times, and who, oh yeah, is the one who actually defeated the second darkest character in the entire series.
Not my daughter, you bitch.
Oh man, you cannot watch that scene without getting hyped. All Umbridge has them do is just read the book, which apparently Dumbledore is okay with. So certainly, any of those people is qualified to at least sit there and watch them read the book. Especially, and maybe even notably, The Wet Plant. Heck, for that matter, why doesn't Dumbledore himself just teach the class? I mean, we know he's done it in the past, and again, just literally anyone would have been better than Umbridge. The reason is because Dumbledore wants Harry to understand the corruption of the Ministry and to double down on Harry's loyalty to Dumbledore. Because we all agree Umbridge is the actual worst, but at the end of the day, all she really has control over is a high school. But her control there does serve as a very good small scale example of what it might be like if Voldemort takes over the Ministry. Umbridge comes across a thing she can't control? No problem. She just passes another law. Do those laws make things harder for her? No problem. Her and the Inquisitorial Squad are just above the law. Voldemort and the Death Eaters are the exact same way. As soon as they have control over the Ministry, they pass legislation to round up Muggleborns, they taboo Voldemort's name to spread fear, they put a bounty on Harry's name to discredit him, and they no longer have to fear retribution for the use of deadly spells. And it's important for Harry to see this firsthand because, and I know I sound a little bit like a broken record here, but Dumbledore is the only one who knows the contents of the prophecy, and that Harry has to be the one to kill Voldemort, which means he is uniquely qualified to be the only one to guide Harry without an ulterior motive. Harry has to be able to trust only Dumbledore and say no to other offers of help, because no matter what, they will be self-serving, if not straight up malicious. Plus, having Umbridge there offers Harry a way to practice fighting tyranny. Because having Umbridge there teaching them absolutely nothing almost immediately encourages unity and rebellion from about 75% of the student body, which, if you recall, was a goal Dumbledore failed to accomplish last year, but something he definitely does not stand in the way of after the DA is formed. Which is also something he knows is happening the moment it is happening, because unbeknownst to any of the students, the barman at the Hogshead is Dumbledore's brother, Aberforth. And yet, Dumbledore does nothing to stop it. In fact, he totally defends it against Ministry investigation, totally playing dumb despite knowing exactly what they're up to. Now, that said, it's hard to say for sure that Dumbledore wanted Harry to form some sort of secret society or defense league or something. That would be like a really wildly specific goal, and after all of the students are suffering under Umbridge, so why would he think Harry in particular would be the one to do something about it? I mean, it's not like he tells him to or anything. But here's the thing. He doesn't have to tell Harry because he knows Harry will be the one to do something, because the Ministry that year is out to discredit three things: Dumbledore, Harry, and the return of Voldemort.
He's not back.
Voldemort, who at this point has failed to kill Harry in person on 4 occasions, and whom Harry saw return the previous year and murder a classmate. Combine that with Harry's track record for heroics, like being the one to protect the Philosopher's Stone, to find the Chamber of Secrets, to fend off 100 Dementors, and it feels pretty obvious Dumbledore knew Harry would do something, and maybe even wanted him to, and that is why he allowed Umbridge to be appointed. And the foreshadowing here is really kind of perfect. I mean, if Umbridge and the Inquisitorial Squad represent Voldemort and the Death Eaters, then Harry and the DA represent Dumbledore and the Order of the Phoenix. Which, by the way, Dumbledore might not have told Harry to form a secret defense league, but he did also have Harry stay at the headquarters of his own secret defense league that summer. So I'm just saying, I'm not saying for sure it was Inception, but like... But that brings us to the final bit of Dumbledore's plan for Harry this year, to finally tell him about the prophecy. Dumbledore tells Harry, "I defy anyone who has watched you as I have, and I have watched you more closely than you can have imagined, not to want to save you more pain than you had already suffered." First of all, there it is, right there. Dumbledore just admitting to the plan, always having someone nearby to keep an eye on Harry and push him in the right direction when he needed it. And we touched on this a little bit earlier, but with Voldemort back, Dumbledore is officially out of excuses for not telling Harry why Voldemort tried to kill him. But I do think he finally intends to, which, as we said earlier, is why he really wants Harry to learn occlumency. Of course, Harry doesn't, but it ends up working out okay for Dumbledore in the end, because the prophecy is smashed, and at that point there's no way for Voldemort to collect it, including breaking into Harry's mind, because after he tries to possess him and feels the mortal agony of coming into contact with a pure and whole soul, Dumbledore is confident Voldemort won't try and attack Harry's mind again. This, however, also means from Voldemort's point of view that he will never know the prophecy, so not gonna bother trying collecting it anymore. May as well revert to the original, very elegant plan, which is screw it, kill Harry. And Dumbledore knows Voldemort has done this math, which is the thing that at long last finally forces his hand and makes him tell Harry the prophecy. On top of that, the whole world knows Voldemort is back now, so the time for preparation is over. The time to attack has begun. And you might think that with Harry knowing the prophecy, all the cards are finally on the table. Dumbledore's big plan is just over. But despite his honesty and despite Dumbledore telling Harry he was going to tell him everything, he doesn't. He still has at least 3 aces left up his sleeve. And boy, are they some big ones. But we will cover that next week. For now, that is it. That is part 5 of Dumbledore's big plan. Welcome to part 6 of Dumbledore's big plan, where today we're going to be discussing the Half-Blood Prince. The Half-Blood Prince, or as it may otherwise be called, Dumbledore's big plan. I mean, the days of guiding Harry through various hoops and teaching him the value of love and unity and trust and friendship and all that are behind us. Dumbledore has now taught Harry everything he can about the kind of person Harry needs to be to defeat Voldemort. And he's even armed him with 2 whole spells.
Expelliarmus! 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 Expecto Patronum! Expecto Patronum! Expecto Patronum!
All that's left is to tell Harry how to actually kill Voldemort, to teach him about his past and use that to hunt down his anchors to life, his Horcruxes. Finally, the whole plan is on the table and out in the open. Almost. It's like 97% of the way on the table and out in the open, but Dumbledore does still have a few aces up his sleeves. At this point in the game, Dumbledore has to be extremely careful about which order and when Harry learns the final bits of information. He can see that victory against Voldemort is nearly at hand. All the pieces are on the board. He just has to start making his moves at exactly the right moments, because Dumbledore actually has 2 goals in mind now. The first is, of course, to defeat Voldemort, which will involve Harry sacrificing himself. The second is for Harry to survive that sacrifice. Half-Blood Prince, as it relates to Dumbledore's plan, is that so many of Dumbledore's actions are actually inactions. Which isn't to say he isn't actively taking steps to prepare Harry for the final battle with Voldemort. It's just that all of those actions are really obvious and the subject of most of the book. But even his active steps are different from our other entries in this series, where Dumbledore is just front and center with Harry, as opposed to being behind the scenes and pulling the strings on Harry's life without him realizing it. Conveniently for us, though, the goals we outlined earlier about defeating Voldemort and Harry surviving death fall neatly into each of these camps. So first, let's start with what Dumbledore is doing rather than what he isn't doing, which is teaching Harry about Voldemort's past and what kind of person he is. I'd like to open with a quote from The Art of War. "If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. If you know yourself, but not the enemy, for every victory gained, you will also suffer a defeat. If you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle." This is the principle that Dumbledore is acting on in this book, in this war against Voldemort, and notably is something that Voldemort is not acting on. Voldemort seems to firmly fall into that second scenario of knowing yourself but not knowing your enemy, and sure enough, for every victory he has, he also suffers a defeat. He finds Quirrell and the Philosopher's Stone, but ends up getting the stone destroyed. The diary successfully opens the Chamber of Secrets and attacks a bunch of Muggleborns, but in the end, the Basilisk dies and the Horcrux, the diary, is destroyed. Voldemort finally gets his body back in the graveyard and then promptly loses a duel to an unqualified wizard. And then after Harry finally takes his bait and retrieves the prophecy for him, the prophecy gets smashed and the entire wizarding world learns that he is returned.
He's back.
Again, if you know yourself, but not your enemy, for every victory gained, you will also suffer a defeat. This is one of the main reasons Voldemort is so unsuccessful time and time again. He's so arrogant, and the odd thing is, he actually does think he understands Harry. He even says so in the Deathly Hallows.
"You sound like Lucius. Neither of you understands Potter as I do. He does not need finding. Potter will come to me. I know his weakness, you see, his one great flaw. He will hate watching the others struck down around him, knowing that it is for him that it happens. He will want to stop it at any cost. He will come."
The great irony here is that this is Voldemort's one great flaw. But the point is, Voldemort thinks Harry will come to the forest out of guilt and fear, not out of selflessness, and certainly not as a means to defeat him. Dumbledore is determined, though, that Harry will not fall victim to the same mistake, which is why he does everything he can to teach Harry as much about Voldemort's past and who he is. He shows him Voldemort's last living relatives, the Gaunts, and the kind of pure blood mania they believed in. He shows him Voldemort's abused mother, who magically coerces his father into a relationship. His father who then abandons his wife and unborn child after realizing they exist. Dumbledore shows Harry the orphanage where Voldemort grew up, where he was alienated from the other kids because of his powers. Not that he really understood them at that point. How he collected objects as trophies of his torment of the other children. And at last he showed him Hogwarts, where Voldemort finally did feel at home, but remained isolated as the single most talented student in the school. And the purpose of these lessons on the surface may seem to just educate Harry about the Horcruxes, which they do, but the real lesson is how Dumbledore has been using this information about Voldemort's past to locate the Horcruxes. How Voldemort chose places that were significant to himself as hiding spots for the Horcruxes. In particular, Voldemort's desire to have a sense of belonging in the wizarding world and his absolute affinity for Hogwarts and anything to do with it end up being crucial bits of information for Harry in his quest. And you can see these lessons really come through a year later in Deathly Hallows when Ron says, "You really understand him. Bits of him. Bits. I just wish I'd understood Dumbledore as much, but we'll see. Come on. Ollivander now." Don't you worry, Harry, we got you covered. We're figuring out all the Dumbledore bits here in 2020. You're not here yet, but you're gonna love it. All we do is stay inside and pretend we don't exist. It's great. Hope this joke doesn't age well. Point is, these lessons from Dumbledore are highly instructive in helping Harry track down, in particular, the cup and the diadem. Because Harry is able to understand about Voldemort that he would have wanted a vault in Gringotts and seen it as a real part of belonging in the wizarding world. And all throughout Deathly Hallows, Harry is having to contend with Ron and Hermione, who continuously shoot down his insistence that Voldemort would have hid a Horcrux at Hogwarts. Personally, I like to think that when they finally figured out Voldemort did hide one at Hogwarts, Harry took a little private moment to do like a little "I told you so" dance. And once they know a Horcrux is at Hogwarts, Harry is then able to deduce how Voldemort found it in the first place by charming the Grey Lady, and he's able to figure out where Voldemort hid it because he understands Voldemort's arrogance and fascination with Hogwarts. Which is to say, he knows that Voldemort arrogantly believed he was the only one to ever find the Room of Requirement. And what I kind of love about Dumbledore teaching Harry all of this is the faith it demonstrates in Harry. Because at that point, Dumbledore has already arranged his death with Snape, and he already knows everything Harry knows, if not more, and yet he himself has not located all of the Horcruxes. He simply understands that this knowledge and knowing your enemy is extremely valuable, even if he isn't sure how it will be useful to Harry yet. On the other hand, though, there is plenty of information Dumbledore deems not worthy for Harry to know yet, because it all plays into his second goal for Harry, which is for Harry to survive death. And again, he cannot know that it is possible for him to survive death, and that is sort of the really crucially important thing. If you will recall back to our Goblet of Fire video, we talked about a gleam of triumph in Dumbledore's eyes. This gleam happens upon learning that Voldemort has used Harry's blood to regenerate his body. It was the moment Dumbledore realized Harry might have a way back, might have a way to survive. Because at that point, Dumbledore already knows Harry is gonna have to die, but suddenly a window of opportunity has opened. And I think it's worth pointing out here that until that moment, Dumbledore kind of was just raising Harry as a pig for slaughter, but as of learning this crucial piece of information, he has to adjust it because the game has changed. Harry can survive. So first, let's fast forward to the resolution of this plan where Harry does in fact survive, and he and Dumbledore have the following exchange. "But I should have died. I didn't defend myself. I meant to let him kill me. And that will, I think, have made
all the difference.
This little exchange helps inform so many of Dumbledore's decisions. Harry has to mean to die. He has to face Voldemort with intent to die, with no idea that survival is possible, because that is what it means to be the true master of death.
You are the true master of death, because the true master does not seek to run away from death. He accepts that he must die and understands that there are far, far worse things in the living world than dying.
So in short, if Harry believes he can survive, then the sacrifice can't be real and he won't be able to come back. Now, rest assured his death would still count and the Horcrux would still be destroyed. Harry just wouldn't be able to survive it. Dumbledore, though, who has come to care for Harry, suspects that survival is a possible outcome and so starts leading Harry down the path towards that goal, which is why he does not tell him the following things. First is that Snape loved Lily. Second is the existence of the Deathly Hallows. And third, that Harry himself is a Horcrux. Harry comes so close to getting the truth about Snape from Dumbledore just before they leave to go hunt for the locket. And you can tell Dumbledore really considers telling him.
Professor, how can you be sure Snape's on our side?
Dumbledore did not speak for a moment. He looked as though he was trying to make up his mind about something. At last, he said,
I am sure. I trust Severus Snape completely.
This is a really tough moment for Dumbledore. He certainly believes Harry has a right to know this information as it relates to the death of his parents, and he just learned that Snape is the one who overheard the prophecy. But this is an example of Dumbledore learning from his mistakes in Order of the Phoenix, where he admitted to caring for Harry too much. Telling Harry the truth here might ease his mind, but it won't save his life, because the real reason he can't tell Harry here is later revealed during The Prince's Tale. Dumbledore's portrait is talking to Snape, telling him to go give the Sword of Gryffindor to Harry, Ron, and Hermione in the Forest of Dean, and warns him not to be seen because
if Voldemort should read Harry's mind and see you acting for him.
Snape then cuts him off. But the point is, if Harry knows the truth about Snape, then Voldemort could learn the truth about Snape, which ultimately might not have been the worst thing, except that Dumbledore has already arranged his death with Snape, which means Snape's ability to act from within Voldemort's ranks is about to multiply by like 10. Snape, being the one who kills Dumbledore, wins him 100% faith and trust from Voldemort, meaning Snape can then cause that much more mayhem, which he totally does. He protects Order members during the Battle of the Seven Potters, he gives Harry, Ron, and Hermione the sword, and he's even suggesting plans to the Order from behind the scenes. But the other real bigger issue is that Snape is the only other person that knows Harry needs to die at the hands of Voldemort, that Harry must sacrifice himself. And Dumbledore entrusts Snape with the task of eventually telling Harry this.
So the boy must die? And Voldemort himself must do it, Severus. That is essential.
Which, by the way, if you've ever thought it was super convenient the way in which Snape finally eventually does give Harry this information that, wow, if Voldemort had just used Avada Kedavra and not killed Snape with Nagini, that would have been the end of it. Harry never would have known. The reason Voldemort doesn't use Avada Kedavra against Snape is because he believes Snape is the master of the Elder Wand, so he doesn't want to use the Elder Wand against Snape because he thinks it's going to backfire in the exact way it does against Harry later on. I finally figured that out last week and I've been like dying to tell you guys. Anyway, since Snape knows this information, it means Harry can't know that Snape is on their side. Because if Voldemort finds out that Snape is actually a traitor, he will certainly break into his mind and learn this information. Which means Voldemort would know that attacking Harry would be as much of an attack on himself as it was an attack on Harry. Does that make sense? He would know that Harry walking into the forest was not a defensive move, but an offensive move, and he may order somebody else to kill Harry, which then again would stop Harry from being able to return. As for the Deathly Hallows, it is certainly a weird one, because at this point, Dumbledore already would have written his will and intends for Harry to get the Resurrection Stone, and for Hermione to get the book with the symbol on the tails of the three brothers that will inevitably lead them to the information about the Deathly Hallows. Plus, he already has the Elder Wand and Harry already has the cloak. So like, Why not just tell him? Well, his reasoning, at least what he tells Harry in King's Cross, is,
I was scared that if presented outright with the facts about those tempting objects, you might seize the Hallows as I did, at the wrong time, for the wrong reasons. If you laid hands on them, I wanted you to possess them safely.
And the stone in particular here is the most crucial. It is the final piece of the puzzle for Dumbledore, the thing he thinks will help Harry walk into death. But based on the way he conceals it, he obviously only intends Harry to use it just before he dies, and definitely not earlier to, like, I don't know, bring Dumbledore back. Boy, can you imagine if Harry had figured this out way sooner and was like, whoa, Dumbledore!
Dumbledore, how do we get salmon?
We are so hungry. He needs Harry to know what the stone does, but also not to tell him ahead of time. So he tells him via the story, but then that also reveals the other Hallows. And he can't tell Harry about the Hallows earlier because it might seem like a way that Harry can survive death. And Harry can't think that he can survive death because then he can't survive death. Got it? And as for not telling Harry that he's a Horcrux ahead of time, well, we've touched on this some already, but it mostly comes down to this quote.
Harry must not know, not until the last moment, not until it is necessary. Otherwise, how could he have the strength to do what must be done?
Revealing this information to Harry is tantamount to just telling him the whole plan. Telling him that this whole time, he has just been intending for Harry to die, which I dare say would undermine quite a bit of the trust he'd built up over the past 6 years. Of course, that's not the full plan. The full plan is for him to survive, but again, he can't tell him this, and I feel like I'm a broken record because if he tells him that, then he can't survive. It's a really weird conundrum. But he can't tell him just the first half either, because if he finds out that Dumbledore's been trying to kill him the whole time without realizing that maybe he could be saved, then he might not carry out the rest of the plan at all, and then Voldemort wins. We can't have that. But there you go, guys. That is part 6 of Dumbledore's big plan. Personally, I really love this one. I like the beginning half about learning about your enemy because I also feel like it helps explain all the stuff Dumbledore doesn't tell Harry about himself in Deathly Hallows. It demonstrates how crucial and important all of the time they spent together was. Like, Dumbledore had one focus, and that was teaching Harry about Voldemort. Learning more about each other, that might have made Harry feel like they were better friends, like, oh, we're both from Godric's Hollow, that's awesome, but it doesn't help defeat Voldemort. Guys, welcome to part 7 of Dumbledore's big plan, where today we are going to be discussing the Deathly Hallows. If you haven't seen parts 1 through 6, I recommend you check that out before you watch this one, but otherwise, let's do this. Guys, this has been an insane journey, but at long last, here we are, book 7, the Deathly Hallows, where it all finally comes together and the full extent of Dumbledore's big plan is realized. The particularly tricky part about the Deathly Hallows, though, is that, well, Dumbledore is dead. So you might be wondering, what plans could he possibly even still have in motion? Like, yeah, sure, Harry is out working to destroy the Horcruxes, but didn't we discuss that in the last episode? Yes, we did. But last week, what we discussed was Dumbledore's plan to kill Voldemort and to make sure Harry survives the encounter. This week, however, we go even deeper to reveal Dumbledore's plan not just to protect Harry's physical existence, but also his soul. Guys, I still remember the very first time I read the Deathly Hallows and the unbridled joy and excitement I felt when I finally got to the final battle. Harry and Voldemort are circling each other in the Great Hall, and Voldemort has the Elder Wand, but Harry has a few more secrets. And as he was revealing them, just the waves of realization that were washing over me. Draco disarmed Dumbledore. Harry took that wand from Draco! Harry is the master of the Elder Wand!
Oh my god.
Expelliarmus! Bang! Whiz! Kapow! So fun. But the trouble is that now, after nearly 20 years of reflection, countless rereads, and hundreds of YouTube videos, I've come to the conclusion and the realization that the Elder Wand wasn't really that important to the final battle. Because by the time the final battle happens, Harry is basically invincible against Voldemort. Since Goblet of Fire, when Voldemort used Harry's blood to regenerate his body, the two have both been acting as each other's anchors to life. Lily's sacrificial love is kept alive in Voldemort, who anchors Harry, and Harry has a piece of Voldemort's soul inside of him, anchoring Voldemort. Neither can kill the other, but also must always be hunting the other. Voldemort has to kill Harry because, according to the prophecy, Harry is the only one with the power to defeat him, and Harry must hunt Voldemort for the exact same reason. He's the only one who can do it. The problem is they couldn't kill each other even if they wanted to, and to complicate matters further, their wands share twin cores, so they can't even fight each other properly. But by the time we get to the final battle, the rules have changed. Each of them has a new wand, and all of the Horcruxes, including the one inside of Harry, have been destroyed. Meaning that Voldemort cannot kill Harry, but that Harry can kill Voldemort. So whoever's the master of the Elder Wand doesn't really matter. Harry has won the fight before it's even started. And when I first realized this, it was kind of a bummer to me. I mean, it's the climax of the entire series, and the fight is about who controls the Elder Wand. Like, how could it not matter? And so I've been asking myself, like, what was the point? Why go through all that trouble to ensure that Harry was in fact master of the Elder Wand? What difference did it make? And the answer is that it made all the difference in the world. Let's back up a few beats to when Scrimgeour reads the contents of Dumbledore's will to Harry, Ron, and Hermione, because it reveals a lot about Dumbledore's intended plan. He, of course, bequeathed the Deluminator to Ron, the Tales of Beedle the Bard to Hermione, and the Resurrection Stone to Harry. And we talked last week about the importance of the Resurrection Stone in terms of Harry marching nobly into defeat so that he could actually survive the final encounter. Basically, that Dumbledore understood how much courage it was going to require to walk into the forest right there and face Voldemort completely wandless, and maybe if you could be escorted by the ones you love the most, that was just the final bit of courage Harry would need. But there was also a fourth object left in Dumbledore's will, which tells the rest of his plan: the Sword of Gryffindor. Harry laments in the Deathly Hallows, "It was there, it was right there on the wall of his office during all of our talks last year. If he wanted me to have it, why didn't he just give it to me then?" Then later on in the story, Harry, Ron, and Hermione conclude that the reason Dumbledore didn't give Harry the sword was because he still planned on using it on the locket. "And Dumbledore didn't give it to me because he still needed it. He wanted to use it on the locket. And he must have realized they wouldn't let you have it if they put it in his will, so he made a copy and put a fake one in the glass case." Aha! And that explanation seems to satisfy the Golden Trio, but it is not actually an accurate conclusion to come to. Yes, Dumbledore realized the Ministry wouldn't actually give it to Harry if he left it to him in his will, but that's kind of the sticking point. He left it in his will, and the will was written before the events of the night of Dumbledore's death, which is important because it means that Dumbledore never intended to give Harry the sword. Like, even if they had successfully made it back that night and had indeed destroyed the locket, Dumbledore was not just going to hand it over. He always intended Harry to receive the sword post-mortem. And you might be thinking, well, couldn't he have planned to give it to him in person and then included it in his will just in case he couldn't do that, like just to cover all of his bases? But no, he could not have done that for the same reasons. If he knew that the Ministry wouldn't give him the sword, then if he gave the sword to him ahead of time and then the Ministry found out he had it after the fact, they could go and seize it. I mean, that's assuming they could find him. No one really ever does, so it probably would have been fine, but you know, my point is, if the plan was just to give it to him in person, then you wouldn't include it in the will because that would just tip off the Ministry. I will say it is possible that Dumbledore did intend to at least show Harry how to use the sword to destroy a Horcrux so that later on, when the will was read, Harry at least understood why he was being given the sword. But that part of the plan didn't really pan out, and it's not the only part of the plan that doesn't go as expected before Dumbledore dies. The other thing that didn't go as intended was the passage of the allegiance of the Elder Wand to Snape. If you planned your death with Snape, you meant him to end up with the Elder Wand, didn't you? "I admit, that was my intention," said Dumbledore, "but it did not work as I intended, did it?" So here's what we know Dumbledore actually planned before he died. First was for Snape to kill him, and subsequently for Harry and everyone else to believe Snape killed him. Second was for Snape to be the master of the Elder Wand. And third was for Harry to get the sword after he had died. And these three things tell us everything and reveal Dumbledore's grand plan to protect Harry's soul. Where do you guys think it is in your body? I imagine like right here? Probably not like down here, right?
Nowhere near the intestines.
I can only imagine how frustrating the prophecy must have been for Dumbledore, who even after he figured out a way for Harry to survive death again, he was still having to face the fact that the prophecy pretty much condemned Harry to become a murderer. And as we all know, murder is the supreme act of evil that rips one's soul. Harry might physically survive, but his soul seemed doomed to be very badly damaged. And you can see Dumbledore even took the same kind of precautions with Draco. We learned this when Snape and Dumbledore are talking about arranging Dumbledore's death.
"If you don't mind dying," said Snape roughly, "why not let Draco do it? The boy's soul is not yet so damaged," said Dumbledore. "I would not have it ripped apart on my account."
And we've seen what having your soul ripped apart looks like after death. This little gross baby thing you see alongside Harry at King's Cross is what is left of Voldemort's soul. It is totally mangled and not able to pass on to death. It is stuck in limbo forever. Now, to be fair, that's the result of an 8-part soul, which is the most mangled soul in the history of magic. But I still don't think Dumbledore wants Harry to have to experience any version of that. So he concocts a way around it. A way for Voldemort to kill himself by falsely believing that he is the master of the Elder Wand, when in actuality, it's Harry. And here's how he planned it. First of all, I think it is safe to say that Dumbledore expected Snape to become headmaster at Hogwarts after he died, meaning that he would also end up with unique access to the Sword of Gryffindor.
"He believes the school will soon be in his grasp, yes. And if it does fall into his grasp," said Dumbledore, almost it seemed as an aside, "I have your word that you will do all in your power to protect the students of Hogwarts." Snape gave a stiff nod. So basically, that means Dumbledore always intended for Snape to be the one to give Harry the sword. And as we said earlier, he also intended for Snape to become the master of the Elder Wand. Not that Snape was ever going to use the wand or even be aware that the wand had shifted its allegiance to him, but Dumbledore did want the wand to shift his allegiance to him because, as he tells Harry in King's Cross, "But you expected Voldemort to go after the wand? I have been sure that he would try, ever since your wand beat Voldemort's in the graveyard of Little Hangleton." Which, okay, in case you didn't catch it, that is basically Dumbledore sentencing Snape to death. He intended Snape to become master of the wand and also was sure that Voldemort would go after it. But that doesn't really seem to add up then, does it? Because if he knows Voldemort is gonna go after it and he intends Snape to be the master of it, then shouldn't he be concerned that Voldemort is indeed going to become the master of the Elder Wand? Well, you'd think so, but no, because that is where the Sword of Gryffindor comes into play. Now, we've established earlier that Dumbledore intended Snape to give Harry the sword, but it's not that easy, is it? According to Dumbledore, "Now, Severus, the sword. Do not forget that it must be taken under conditions of need and valor."
So what I think his original plan was for his portrait to instruct Snape to duel Harry and lose on purpose. Harry was always meant to think Snape killed Dumbledore and always had a grudge against him anyway, so I don't think it would have been very difficult to lure him into a fight. Plus, if Snape was wielding the sword, which Harry knew he needed because of Dumbledore's will, well, that would just anger him further. I mean, how dare Snape wield the Sword of Gryffindor, the slime ball? So, Harry would valiantly duel Snape in honor of Dumbledore, disarm him, unknowingly win the allegiance of the Elder Wand, and claim the sword. Then, later on, Voldemort, in his quest for the Elder Wand, would realize he needed to kill Snape, which he would do, falsely believe that he was the master of the Elder Wand, and then in the final match between Harry, it would backfire because it doesn't want to fire on its true master, and kaboom, Harry wins the day. Voldemort kills himself, Harry's soul is intact, and it really is so perfect. Although, there are a few other loose ends I do want to address and just finish off. Because you might be thinking, well, if Snape intends to lose the duel with Harry, then really neither the wand nor the sword should shift its allegiance to Harry, right? Like if Snape's trying to lose, does that really count as a win for Harry? Would the wand actually transfer to him? And as for the sword, there's not much valor in defeating someone who's trying to lose, right? Well, first of all, the wand doesn't care. Dumbledore plans his death with Snape and is still confident that the wand will shift his allegiance to Snape. So as far as the wand is concerned, dead is dead. Disarmed is disarmed. From Dumbledore's perspective, Harry would become the master even in a planned loss. And as for the sword, it really doesn't matter if Snape is trying to win or lose, because no matter what, from Harry's perspective, Snape is a deadly opponent, and facing him is gonna require courage no matter what. Especially when you consider Snape is arguably the best duelist, and in the last book killed Dumbledore and swiftly defeated Harry over and over and over. Yeah, I said Snape was the best duelist. Take that, Flitwick fans. That one sentence, I don't care. I don't care. Flitwick was a dueling champion. I'm sorry, Snape was Snape. I always assumed that line meant Flitwick was in sort of like league with rules and referees and stuff, not like out in the wild. Snape was Snape. I think Snape beats Flitwick. Yeah, at me. But that, you guys, was Dumbledore's true plan to protect Harry's soul in the Deathly Hallows. Of course, it doesn't work out that way because Draco disarms Dumbledore, but fortunately, Harry works it out on his own and this exact scenario plays out, which honestly is kind of better in my opinion, because it means that Harry figured it out on his own without Dumbledore's help, despite all of his planning. But there you go, guys. That is part 7 of Dumbledore's big plan. I hope you have enjoyed watching this series as much as we have enjoyed making it. It has been so much fun. Thanks as always for watching today's video. Please remember to leave a like on it if you haven't already, and subscribe so you don't miss any future Harry Potter action from us. If you want more Harry Potter action, we have a huge playlist of Harry Potter videos right here. But otherwise, Ben, I will see you in another life, brother.